If you know me, you know how much I absolutely love the summer transfer window. It's all the rumours, the speculation, the anticipation for a new season to begin. And when your team makes a signing, you feel like it's the missing piece and you feel like you're going to go on to bigger and better things. That is unless you support Liverpool like me. And as of this moment, they've yet to make a signing. Despite that, I am still excited. I'm still loving everything before we head into a brand new Premier League season. Because of this and because of all my excitement, I've decided to go and do transfers for every single Premier League club. I'm going to go and realistically rebuild every team in the Premier League, who bring in the players that I think they should bring in, or players that I think they will bring in, as well as selling on players and doing their full transfer business. And then we'll simulate the season and see, with all of the transfers that I've made, who's going to win the Premier League next year and who's going to get relegated, and find out what FM thinks is going to happen. I love doing this video. I love to talk transfers. I love to speculate, and I love to hear from you guys, the fans of these different teams, as you talk to me. You were completely wrong, or maybe actually I'm on the right lines. Hopefully that is the case. Let's jump into it and find out who I think Arsenal are going to go and buy and sell this summer. Before we do jump into Arsenal, which is going to be our first club in today's video, a quick one to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you watching. Please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave me those comments down below. Thank you. I'll make it quick today. Arsenal's business. Let's have a look. Okay, so starting with Arsenal, we can start off with a couple of signings that are either confirmed fully or are very, very, very close to being confirmed. And that is the signings of David Raya on a permanent deal after his loan spell last season. He is going to be with Arsenal and Arsenal are going to spend £27 million now to sign him permanently. And Ricardo Calafiori, who is all but confirmed. He just hasn't been announced by the club yet, although I think medicals have all been taking place and things like that. He will be signing, and I think this is a really smart signing for Arsenal. He is going to complete the full centre-back defence that Mikel Arteta seems to be going for, and I just think he is also a really good footballer, and he's just a beautiful human. Where's his hair? I mean, maybe my face back is a little bit out of date there. He doesn't look as good without his long hair, does he? Either way, he will have long hair in real life, won't he? The rest of it, though, I'm going to speculate on who I think each club is going to sign, as well as telling you about the signings or the sales that they will make over the course of the window. I think Arsenal are going to bring in some reinforcements to their midfield, and I think they will be in the shape of Mikel Merino, who looks like a really promising, good, strong player. I say promising, he's actually 28 years old. We saw him shine in the Euros. Well, we saw him score that lovely header was it in extra time to score the win? I think it was in extra time, wasn't it? And then he ran around the corner flag like that. It was a lovely, lovely thing. And Arsenal have been heavily linked with making a move for him this summer. He feels very Mikel Arteta. So I think Mikel Merino would make sense to be signed by Mikel Arteta. And I think he might take the place of one or two that are going to be exiting Arsenal. They've spent a lot of money over the past few years. You know, Declan Rice was a huge, huge signing last summer. So I think they will need to make sales. Otherwise, PSR might eventually catch up with them. And I feel like PSR might be a conversation we end up having a little bit in this video over a few different teams. Arsenal will be fine though, because they've already sold Emile Smith-Rowe all but fully to Fulham, although in this save here I have put him to Crystal Palace because this is before the Fulham real links came out, so I knew that he would depart for about 25 million. I've said I think it's going to be about 35 in real life, so that's really good PSR money. It's a shame to let him go because he's one of their own, but the money they can bring in will allow them to go and strengthen higher up the pitch, which is what I think they will go and do. I think Smith-Rowe will go. I think Reece Nelson will go. He's heavily linked with Leicester, so another one where I've got it right. I think that he's going to leave, but the club that he's gone to has not been quite right. And then also Thomas Partey. I think he's going to move perhaps to the Saudi League, which is where I've put him here. Al Ettifaq for £20 million. That's the way I've done this video, by the way, just to explain it. Well, you use Arsenal as the example here. I've used the in-game editor to do all of the transfer business, and I've tried to be as realistic as possible with the finances involved to try and create what I think is going to be the real life Premier League on day one, or the end of this transfer window, so we can actually see what's going to happen in the future. Another few players that have gone, like Kozia Dubry, he's gone to a Premier League team. We'll talk about him when we get to Brighton. And a few other players exiting too. Nuno Tavares out on a loan. A few players for less money in there. Kieran Tierney going on loan maybe to Celtic on here I've put. That, though, all of those sales will give Arsenal enough money to go and strengthen in the attack, which is what I think they will go and do. I've plumped for Pedro Neto. I think this could be really smart business. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, yeah, but he's injury prone, isn't he? He is, But I wonder if a move to a team like Arsenal might actually be perfect for him. But they won't be or need to be as reliant on him as Wolves need to be because he's just their best player. But actually with the options that Arsenal have got and giving him less game time and using him when he is fit, you've got an amazing footballer there. And I think Arsenal, if they can afford to do it, I could see this one happening and being a real success. So I've moved him there to play. He could play on either wing, couldn't he, Pedro Neto? He's played on both for Wolves. And then the final one is to take a bit of a plump on an attacking player. Played on the wing a lot. It's Barış Alper Yilmaz. Can play as a striker, plays on the wing, plays for Galatasaray, plays for the Turkish national team. Linked with a few Premier League teams this summer. I think Arsenal still might need that striker presence. They've used Kai Havertz there as the striker a lot, of course, and Jesus, who just hasn't been quite the Gabriel Jesus that we know he can be. Maybe taking a punt on a youngster. They were linked with some big names, I think, previously, but maybe Yilmaz might be the player that we'll see. I say a youngster, he's 24 years old, so he's not necessarily a youngster, but maybe it's still a slight more of a risk than signing someone who's more established, perhaps. I think that one I could see happening. That's the transfer business from Arsenal. We're going to move through and we're going to have a look at the business of all 20 Premier League teams, and then we'll do the simulation of a season. So next up, let's have a look at Villa, who have already been really busy, haven't they? They have, before recording this video, done all of this business down here. If I highlight them to show you, all of that has been done. They've made big moves in the midfield, mainly because of the fact that they had to sell Douglas Luiz. I think most Villa fans were resigned to the fact that they were going to lose him. He wanted out, and of course, they had huge PSR pressure to bring in some funds, and Douglas Luiz was the answer to those problems, as well as the weird Tim Iragbunam and Lewis Dobbin thing that they did with Everton, which slightly dodgy, and as well as the Amari Kellyman deal with Ian Matson as well. Slightly dodgy stuff, but needs must. It kind of maybe is just an indictment of how ridiculous this PSR system is, and if it's leading to teams having to sell their homegrown talents, not sure it's particularly fit for purpose. But then again, you make the argument that clubs shouldn't let themselves get into this situation. I'm not saying which is worst or which is best or which is right. I'm just telling you what's happened here. And they've done a lot of business because of that. So Kellyman out, Douglas Luiz out. They've also, I think they're going to see players like Coutinho leave, Digne, Jacob Ramsey I've moved to Spurs, which I think will be a big move for Spurs to make. And because of that, they needed to sign a midfielder. They've brought in Amadou Onana. They've brought in Ian Matson. They've brought in Ross Barkley. And I think they might bring in Giovanni Lo Celso. Maybe it will actually be linked to that Spurs Jacob Ramsey deal. Maybe they'll do the PSR write-off thing that they seem to be doing in that deal as well. Of course, they have also just sold Moussa Diaby to Al Ittihad for huge money, which is a real surprising one. He's come in, been quite good actually in the Premier League, Diaby, and now he's sold for big money to the Saudi League. Strange one, and I wonder, will Villa be able to go and spend that money on João Felix? I've brought him in this particular video because he's heavily linked, and I think a manager like Unai Emery would back himself to get the best out of João Felix. He's still only 24. Can you believe that? How is João Felix still only 24? But I think maybe there's still a revival in this career just there, and maybe Unai Emery is strong enough as a manager to get the best out of a player like João Felix. It could be really fun. It could be Coutinho, or it could be brilliant. I guess we'll find out if it happens, won't we? Next up is Bournemouth, and quick one on this. I have got it right in a position that I think Bournemouth will be looking to strengthen this summer in a centre-back. I've brought in Kevin Danso in the video today. However, as I record this, the news has broken this morning that they're going to move for Dean Huyson, who is I think he's 6'4" or 6'5", young defender from Juventus. So, and they're going to spend about £10 million on him. So, if you want to, just in your own minds, just replace Danzo with Huyson. And I was sort of right, but just got the wrong person here. Other than that, though, Bournemouth, I think, will have quite a quiet summer. They've brought in already Unal on a permanent deal. They've had to do the same with Sinistera as well. I wonder if they'll go for a new goalkeeper in Yvonne Mavogo. I think he's just a solid type of signing in goal. And then maybe they'll take a punt on Dele Alli. I think we all want to see Dele Alli be a success, don't we? We know the troubles and worries that he's been through. Maybe Bournemouth could be the team where he comes and finally revives that career, because it was so promising earlier on, wasn't it? Maybe Dele Alli on a free transfer, because he is, of course, on a free transfer this summer. Looking at the outs for Bournemouth, they have let Lloyd Kelly go to Newcastle on a free. They've also seen Jamal Lowe, Kiefer Moore leave. I think they might see David Brooks go this summer, Jadon Anthony potentially, as well as some other players like, I don't know, Mark Travers for 2.7 million perhaps. That, though, is the Bournemouth business. Next up, we've got we've got Brentford. Brentford, this one I keep forgetting about because it happened so long ago, so early in the window. Brentford actually signed this Igor Thiago. He's a big, strong striker signed from Club Brugge. They spent big on him as well, £28 million. And then as I was going through the teams to think of these transfers, that made me think, oh, is that an Ivan Toney replacement? But preemptively, it might well be. I think Ivan Toney has always had these plans to leave the club. I think this might just be the summer, even though maybe his options aren't quite as it's not as long of a list as I think he thought it was going to be. Maybe Spurs. I think he'd be a good signing for Spurs. He's a really talented footballer, Ivan Toney. We saw it in the Euros, how impactful he could be. Maybe this might be the year that he does finally leave Brentford. So I've put him to Spurs for 36 million, and then I think they've already replaced him with Thiago. They've also all but signed Stuart Armstrong. I'm not sure if that one's actually confirmed yet, but he's been playing as a trialist in some of their friendlies and been quite good. So I think they'll sign him on a free transfer too. He's come from Southampton. And then finally, maybe a punt, maybe something to do with the Ivan Toney transfer. I think we're going to see a lot more of these part exchange deals. Maybe Manus Solomon going in the other direction could be a useful asset for Brentford. They'll do what they usually do. They'll bring in a bit of money. They'll bring in some players, but not too much. They'll be quite sensible, and they'll probably finish between 10th and 15th in the league, and everyone will be fine with it. Let's move through to another team that is also very smart in the transfer windows, and that is Brighton. Brighton also have made some moves already as I record this. Yankuba Minter being, I think, the star of these moves that they would have made this summer. I think they're going to be delighted with this deal. It's another one that is PSR impacted, which so many of these transfers are because of PSR issues that clubs are having. Newcastle had that deadline that they just had to sell players by, and they looked at the idea of maybe moving Gordon on, according to some reports, and it was all a little bit frantic. In the end, Brighton said, do you know what, we'll use this opportunity to bring in Minter, who was brilliant last year for Feyenoord, alongside another Feyenoord signing in Mats Wiefer. But just going back to Minter, I've been watching some clips this morning of him playing in a pre-season friendly and scoring for Brighton. He reeks of it. Stinks of Liverpool being linked to him for about £80 million in a couple of seasons' time. Just mark these words. Come back to this video when that does happen, because they were linked with him at the start of this window. And he has the final link with Arne Slot too. And then they didn't take the punt. He's gone to Brighton. It just would be just classic Liverpool if then eventually they were like, oh, he is really good. We should try and sign him now for about 3 times the price. Just watch out for that one. I mean, it could also be the same for Mats Wiefer, who was linked with Liverpool too. I love this footballer. I've called him the Rodri Light. I've seen other people call him Rodri Light. If he ends up being really, really good for Brighton, I'm going to be really upset, because it will be one of those where I feel like it's a missed opportunity then, and maybe it just seemed too obvious, because going from Feyenoord with Arne Slot straight to Liverpool, you tend to, as a manager, try to avoid doing too much of that. We've seen Ten Hag do it and it's not worked out, and maybe that would be the only reason. But Brighton, they're great at their talent identification, aren't they? If he ends up being good, I'm just going to be livid personally, because I think he's brilliant. I really like him. He's very classy on the ball. He's easy on the eye. I'm a big fan of Mats Wiefer. I'm intrigued to see how he does in the Premier League. Those ones have all been done actually already, confirmed. Ibrahim Osman is another one brought in from Nordsjælland in Denmark, and I'm going to go and speculate with a couple in Amario Dewberry from Arsenal and Victor Lindelof. It's not quite the Brighton way, but I think he could be quite dependable for them, and I think it could represent a bit of a bargain and an opportunity, because Manchester United are going to want to move him on. So maybe we'll see him go and sign for a team like Brighton, potentially. I've put the outs there, which isn't necessarily much. It's just Adam Webster, really, to Ipswich for about £12 million. Let's move through to a team that is slightly less sensible than Brighton in the window, and that's Chelsea. And I've made them not sensible in this window too, after they've done quite a lot of business already. Let's have a look at that first of all. They've brought in Tosin. They've beaten it. He was about to go to Newcastle, it seemed, and then he's come from Fulham to Chelsea, which is a very easy move to make, isn't it? They've signed Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall from Leicester. I'm sceptical about this. Of course, there's the Maresca link, which is why he knows what type of player he is, but is Dewsbury-Hall better than Conor Gallagher? Is Dewsbury-Hall going to push the needle for Chelsea? Maybe he will. I think there's definitely a talented footballer in there, even though his name does sound like a prom venue. It's not that we need to focus on, though, is it? They've also signed Amari Kellyman for nearly £20 million. That's a PSR signing if ever I've seen one, right? They've also signed Renato Vega, who I didn't know loads about. Plays for Basel in the Swiss League. I mainly know what I know about him now because Fabrizio Romano tweeted about him about 15 million times. He's come in as a midfield option. And then finally, they've made two big signings, in my opinion, or in this particular universe. And that is because of actually how much money they've seen go out of the club by some of the sales. If I show you those sales now, some of them have actually happened. It's a long list, look. Some of them have actually happened. Players like Maatsen has left, of course. Amari Hutchinson for 20 million to Ipswich. Lewis Hall has become permanent at Newcastle. Ziyech has moved on. We've seen the links to players like, well, we've seen loans for Andre Santos. We've seen Kepa probably going to move on after this. These are ones that I've decided to do that I've highlighted here. Robert Sanchez, I think they're going to want to sign a new goalkeeper. They're also not convinced over Petrovic, I don't think. There's talks of sending him out on loan, and they're going to want to sign a goalkeeper, I think. So that's where the Georgi Mamadashvili signing comes into it. I'll talk about him in a second, but just to show you some of the other outs that I could see happening this summer. Will Conor Gallagher finally move on? I think Spurs will be there waiting if they do decide to move him on. I think that would be a good signing for Spurs as well. He's a good footballer, even if he's not a popular footballer. And maybe that's just because he's not the player that maybe England fans want to see in their midfield. But there is a footballer in Conor Gallagher. There's a real engine on him, even if he's a little bit more limited than some players. I think in a Spurs and system, I think he could be really, really useful for them. Trevor Chalobah, he was left out of the tour squad, so he's going to be moving on. I've sent him to Crystal Palace for £25 million. I wasn't sure what his destination is going to be, but Palace, perhaps as a Guehi replacement, could make a little bit of sense there. I could see that being a ripple effect that does happen. Lukaku, heavily linked to Napoli on his tour of Serie A. We've got Fofana maybe on a loan. Broham, will he finally leave on a permanent deal? He's been, I've thought he might move to Everton for years and years. It just never has happened. And then a couple of little ones at the end there. Bettinelli, for example, to Huddersfield. With all of these outs, though, it gives Chelsea money. And we know what Chelsea are like when you give them money. They're crazy and very unpredictable. So I've tried to predict it. Georgi Mamadashvili, big mama, love him to bits. Brilliant Georgian goalkeeper, still very, very young. He's huge as well. I could see this one happening. I think he's going to move from Valencia. Just who he goes to, I'm not quite sure. Will he go to City if Ederson moves on? Not quite sure. Maybe Diogo Costa there. I'm not sure. Either way, big mama to Chelsea. You heard it here first. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe it's linked already by the time this comes out. And finally, couldn't you just see this? And I know this is speculative, but couldn't you just see Chelsea ended up being like, oh, do you know what? We've got money to spend. Should we just go and spend all of it on a new striker in Victor Osimhen, who has been linked to them previously and he is, I think, going to leave Napoli this summer. PSG are lurking and waiting for that one, but I could just see it, just going big on him, maybe late in the window and signing Victor Osimhen to Chelsea. If it happens, you know that I predicted it. So let's keep an eye on that one. That's the Chelsea business. I think it'll be crazy. I think they will be quite strong there. If they do get Big Mama in and Victor Osimhen, I think those are two really good not good strikers, both of them, but good players, the pair of them. Let's move through to our next team, which is Palace. Palace have this summer signed Chadi Riyad and Daichi Kamada. I've brought them in Emil Smith-Rowe. However, he now looks like he's likely to go to Fulham instead of Crystal Palace. So moving just across London there to Fulham instead. So I've got this one wrong. So maybe there'll be a replacement in this. But it does look like they are going to bring in Ismail Assar as I record this. And that was a good prediction on my part. And then, as I mentioned before, Trevor Chalobah coming in maybe to be the Mark Guehi replacement. If Mark Guehi doesn't leave this summer, I think his contract may well be up at the end of this season. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like that might be the case. And I've actually speculated that he might move to Real Madrid. They need centre-backs. They didn't get Lenny Yoro, and they've lost Nacho, and they need centre-backs. So maybe Mark Guehi could be that guy. I've speculated and I've sold him there for £70 million and then Chalobah in as the replacement. What do you think? You can see some of the outs here, which we'll talk about later on. We've got Eze moving on to City for £65 million. I think he might go as well. I think they'd be very happy to keep hold of him, Palace. But if there is a big bid like this, I think we might end up seeing him leave, as well as Elise, which does give Glasner a bit of a job to try and make sure that he steadies things at Palace, because they were so good. They've been so impressive towards the end of last season, and they look like a real unit, but a lot of their talisman were players like Elise and Eze. And we know that Elise is going to move on to Bayern Munich now. So let's see how Palace go next year. I think he's a good manager, Glasner, and I think they've got all of the bases of a really strong squad there already. But with a few players exiting, will that impact them? I think players like Guehi, Eze and Elise going would impact anyone. So we'll see. Next up, I've gone for these players for Everton, the kings of the PSR cop-outs. They have had their weird business that they've done with Villa with Tim Iriogbunen, and of course going the other way is Lewis Dobbin, who's now for £10 million, which just seems wild to me. They've also already sold Amadou Onana and Ben Godfrey. Ben Godfrey going to Atalanta. We talked about Onana going to Villa earlier. We've seen Iliman Ndiaye come in from Marseille for about £50 million. We've seen lots of rumours about Jesper Lindstrom coming in from Napoli too. I don't think that's quite confirmed as I record this, but I think that one is going to happen. And we talked about before Broja being maybe an option brought in by Sean Dyche to play up front for him, especially if they do see a player like Dominic Calvert-Lewin move on, who again, a bit like Ivan Toney, has been waiting for a move, I think, for a while. Perhaps maybe his injury issues have had a negative effect on that, but I could see him moving, and maybe it could be West Ham, although I think maybe West Ham might end up going for the lad John Duran from Villa instead. But I think we may see a little bit of transfer window merry-go-round, and maybe we'll see Dominic Calvert-Lewin caught up in that as well. I've gone for this for Everton. Next up, let's have a look at Fulham. In at Fulham, I've gone for these players, although that we need to switch them around a little bit based on real life now. I went for Reece Nelson to Fulham because I thought that was something that they might end up doing. However, it actually seems that they're going to sign Emile Smith-Rowe, so just replace them because, you know, different youngsters from Arsenal, really. I say youngsters. How old is Reece Nelson now? He's now 24. We can still call him a youngster, I think. I think Reece Nelson Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal will be good business for them. I think they may have overpaid slightly, £35 million, but needs must perhaps. And perhaps, you know, with some of the sales they've made, they felt like they could go and spend that money on him. I've gone for Kurt Zouma coming in from West Ham. Calvin Phillips in from Man City, who had that loan spell at West Ham and wasn't very good for them, but maybe a fresh start at Fulham as an option, maybe coming in to replace João Palhinha, who we know has moved on to Bayern Munich for pretty big money, 43 million. And then we also know about Ryan Sessegnon, who has, I think, all but signed on a free transfer. I think that's decent business to bring him back to the club. I think that's a nice romantic one to bring Ryan Sessegnon back. I've sold, as I mentioned then, Palhinha's gone. Tosin we know has also gone. So that's where the Kurt Zouma signing comes in to replace him in the defence. And we also may see Jay Stansfield leave permanently. Kevin Mbabu might be finally off. Is Kevin Mbabu still actually on Fulham's books? Wild one if he actually is. I feel like that's a very strange one. Kevin Mbabu's this is a tangent, but he's had a very weird career, hasn't he? The fact that he was at Newcastle and Rangers early in his career before going to Switzerland, which is of course his country of birth, but then coming back, it's a strange career for Kevin Mbabu. Anyway, he's finally off to Basel, I believe. Next up, let's have a look at a newly promoted team, Ipswich, and I think they're going to go for it. There's always whenever a team gets promoted to the Premier League, they either are very, very sensible, a la Norwich a few seasons ago, and then immediately go back down, or they go for it and they spend big and they just try and punch themselves into the Premier League proper. Let's think of maybe Forest doing that when they first come up and just made loads of signings. I feel like Ipswich are being quite ambitious with the transfer moves that they're making. They've made a lot already. Players like Amari Hutchinson coming in. Ben Johnson on a free transfer as well, I think is good business. I think they may go for it a little bit more with some other signings too. And these are the players that I've gone for. I have gone for Adam Webster, we talked about before. Sammy Smodic, who was, of course, the Championship top goal scorer, I do believe, from Blackburn. I think that is something that we see happen quite a lot, don't we? They'll be hoping that he's very much in the mould of Gyökeres, coming from the Championship and then going one better or a few better by going to a bigger league. Although I'm not quite sure Smodic is quite the player that Gyökeres is. However, I think that's what Ipswich will be hoping for if this does happen. Peter Musa from FC Dallas. Strange old footballer, Peter Musa. He's been around the place too. He's very good on FM, isn't he? But he was at Benfica for a while. He then went to FC Dallas, and now maybe Ipswich are going to take a punt on him. And then finally, Paddy McNair. Paddy McNair, who, in spite of never playing for Ipswich, feels like the most Ipswich player in the world for some reason. To me personally, anyway. There will be some sales, I believe. These are the ones I've listed them on here, but there's a lot of work to do for Ipswich. But I think they're going to go for it. I think this might be how they go for it. Something like this, anyway. And that leads us on to Leicester. Leicester have already brought in Abdul Fatawu. They've also brought in Bobby Decordova-Reid and Caleb Okoli. I think this one's one that is also done and completed on there as well. And Michael Golding as well, actually. Yeah, these are both done. That Michael Golding transfer was part of the Kiernan Dewsbury Hall deal, wasn't it? To go the other way. Another one of these weird player part exchange things that we see happening. Those are 4 deals that are already done. The one that I've gone for finally is a player that they've been heavily linked with, Matthias Sule. But I was reading this morning that it does seem that he may well end up going to, I think it might be Roma in the end. But if they could, they're not quite dead in the water as I record this. So a player like Sule, I think, would be a really cool signing for them too. Really talented winger. Fits the mould of what I think a Leicester player might end up looking like. Something like this. So I've gone for him in there. Although Leicester do have, again, financial worries, and they've got this contentious issue going on at the moment with the Premier League about potential points deduction. So I don't think they're going to want to be too ambitious, but I think it's it's Leicester, so I think they will want to spend a little bit. They want to get themselves back to where they were before. And they've got the Dewsbury Hall money that they can go and spend, of course, too. And Tom Cannon's also moved on. The Cannonball has moved on to Millwall. Next up, it's my specialist subject. It's Liverpool. And you know that I could talk about this all day long. I'm going to try and keep it brief today, because it is all speculative. Liverpool have made no signings as of this moment. They've also really not sold anybody either. So all of this is me thinking what might happen. And I think any of the players, you might think you might want to change them out for another player who plays in that position. I think these will be the positions that Liverpool will go for. But the way that the window has gone this summer has seemingly been Liverpool get linked to a player and then a local journalist will come and dismiss it completely and we'll move on to the next player. It's been very, very quiet, although they've talked a big game about potentially going and spending big in August after Arne Slot's got to know the squad a little bit more and they've been on the tour together in the USA. So watch this space. We have had links for some of these, or a couple of these players, and some very tentative links to the final player, which is Zubimendi in here. But let's start with Inacio. I think he could be a good option for Liverpool to go and sign at centre-back. Can also play left-back. I think he fits the mould of what Liverpool would be looking for a centre-back, which is a player that is not necessarily a starter, but would come in and be able to play a lot of games and would happy to maybe versatile enough to go and play games in other positions too. Think about playing left back if Trent's inverting. That becomes a 3. I think it would make sense for a player like Inacio. He's 22, so we wouldn't expect to start, but has enough potential that maybe when Van Dijk does leave the club or does retire, he's old now, isn't he, that maybe he can step into that position on the pitch. So I think this one makes sense, and there have been links going back a really long time for Inacio, so maybe this is the summer that it actually happens. If it's not him, there are 1 or 2 other centre-backs that I think they'll be looking at as well, but I'm going to go with Inacio for now. Mo Simakan is the other one that I think might work, although he's right-sided, so we've kind of got Joe Gomez who can do that anyway. Into the midfield, and number 6 I think is definitely a player that will be on Liverpool's list. If it was my choice, and ultimately in this video it is my choice, I would go for Martin Zubimendi. I think he's a brilliant footballer. We saw it again in the Euros for Spain, didn't we? I think if you want somebody to come in and play in a double pivot alongside Alexis McAllister potentially, imagine those two, so technical on the ball. Would it be quite combative enough? Maybe not. Maybe that's an argument to make, but I'd go for Zubimendi. He's got about a £60 million release clause. Liverpool love a release clause. Zubimendi I think would be a real statement of intent as well. So if it happens, then again, I've called it here. If it doesn't happen, keep an eye on, I think, Andre, who still hasn't moved. Heavily linked with Fulham, but still hasn't moved there. We know, like Liverpool have been linked with him for ages. Keep an eye on that one. Or maybe Edison from Atalanta would be my other 2 shouts for central midfield. And then finally, a right winger. There was a weird thing that came out yesterday that was talking about how Liverpool are preparing for Mo Salah to not play for the club anymore. His contract is up at the end of next season. So there is already a conversation to be had about Mo Salah and how long he's going to be there. If you're smart, you get ahead of these things and you bring in the replacement early so they can get settled in and then hit the ground running when that player does leave. Maybe a right winger like Takafuso Kubo could be that guy. Heavily linked in reports in Japan recently, and then sort of more tentatively dismissed by local journalists, but I think he'd be one that kind of fits as well. He's 23, 24, I think he's 24 now, and plays on that right hand side, very technical, quite speedy, really good on the ball, and I think he ticks a lot of boxes for an FSG Michael Edwards type signing. If not Kubo, keep an eye on Mo Kudus, who I think that'd be my dream signing in there. I think for that right hand side, I think he's just a really brilliant footballer. And there's 1 or 2 others that I think could make that move too. Players that have been linked with a lot over the past few years. I think they always go back to those as well. But I've gone for Kubo, Zubimendi, and Inacio. And then on the way out, I've gone for Sepp Vandenberg. It's gone for 4 million here. I think actually Liverpool will hold out for a lot more than that. And ultimately, I think they'll get themselves 10, 15 million at a push. I think PSV might be the more likely destination for Sepp Vandenberg, but he's ended up going to Mainz here for 4 million. Owen Beck might be a loan instead of that. I think we might see the end of Nat Phillips at Liverpool finally, although maybe he'll just cling on as he seems to do most years. Will it be Tsimikas moving on? Depends really whether they are, which defender is brought in. If they can play left back, I think we might then see Tsimikas go if there is a potential suitor for him. Reece Williams, similar to Nat Phillips too, potentially on the way out as well. I've not put in Mo Salah. I've not put in Trent. I'm going to say it now. Trent signs a new contract as well. How's that? Next is Man City, and Man City have done some business already. Savio has come in, sort of suspiciously, from Troyes, but also he's been at Girona, and is that cheating? It feels like it's cheating. Either way, he's a really good young player. Savinho, I think he's also known as. I'm not sure which one he's going to go for when he actually gets to the Premier League, but Savio is a player that's already happened. I'm going to show you the outs first, I think, here, because there are some interesting ones. We've talked about some of them already. Harwood Bellis has gone to Southampton. That's happened. Tommy Doyle has gone to Wolves. That's also happened. I've talked about Liam Delap going to Ipswich, Sergio Gomez to Sociedad, Calvin Phillips we talked about to Fulham, João Cancelo permanently to Barcelona, perhaps 17 million. Ederson, if they get 60 million for him, they're doing very well for that. But it's a huge thing at the moment talking about whether Ederson is going to leave, and it seems like he might do, And Jan Couto to Dortmund, this one is being talked about as something that might well happen as well. That's all money being brought in, and I think they might go and spend it on a couple of players. Eze, it'd be a really cool signing for City. I think it'd be a real shame if he went there, personally for me, but I think for him, it would be a huge move for him. And then a goalkeeper replacement, I think it would be Mamadashvili or Diogo Costa to bring in as the goalie for City. Diogo Costa, I think, makes some sense. So I've put him in there, and that's the City business. We're coming through to towards the end of our transfer business here. Before we do the simulation, I just love talking transfers. It might be a long video, so I apologise if it's too long for you, but I do love talking transfers. Let's have a look at that United business. They've already brought in Yoro and Xerxes for big money. I'll go through them quickly. Ferdi Kadioglu, Manuel Ugarte. I think this would be a good signing, by the way. I know that some United fans aren't so keen on this, but I think this would be a good signing. Matthias de Ligt. And then I've gone for them spending loads of money. They're Manchester United, and they've brought in some money too with some sales, as well as some extra sales on here. That if this happens, if players like Jadon Sancho do get a move to like PSG, I think United go big. It's the first proper summer for Ineos to go and spend money. We've seen it with Yoro being ambitious. They've brought in Xerxes already. They're linked to de Ligt already. They're linked to Ugarte already. Are they going to try and put a real marker down? And if they do that, I think we might see players like Fofana coming in, and then maybe even a very ambitious link for Xavi Simons, who I don't think this happens in real life necessarily, but I think they'd like it to happen in real life. I think he might end up going to RB Leipzig again on a loan, by the way, which I think would be a good choice by him as a player, as a person, to try and, he's thriving there already, and staying there for a bit longer before a permanent move might be a decent way to go for Xavi Simons. But if United they've convinced Yoro to go there already, who is this young 18-year-old huge prospect. Maybe they could go and convince Simons as well. That would be funded by sales of Eriksen out, Sancho out, Casemiro to Al Shabab. I've put here to the Saudi League. Scott McTominay, West Ham. Wan-Bissaka, West Ham. I think this one is one that's more likely to happen. Lindelof we talked about, and then Greenwood made that permanent transfer to Marseille, and Alvaro Fernandez went as well to Benfica permanently. There's money coming in there, and United probably go and spend it, don't they? And Ineos throw their weight about a bit. I don't know if I'd be worried, but I feel like this would be a good transfer window for United. What do you think? Next up, Newcastle. Newcastle have been relatively busy already, actually, as well. They've brought in Lewis Hall permanently. They've had the weird swindle thing that they did with Vlachodimos, the goalkeeper from Forest. Ended up paying, I think it was 20 million they paid. Not dodgy at all, that, is it? Not dodgy at all. After also selling Elliot Anderson for 35. That's just a PSR swindle. We know what it is. Everyone can see it, but needs must, I suppose, in the situation they found themselves in. They've also signed Lloyd Kelly on a free transfer, and it looks like they're going to go and sign Malik Tior from Milan as well. This one to try and bolster their defensive options. Two new centre-backs or defenders brought in Kelly and Tior. And I've gone for a speculative one, which is going to be Wilfried Gnonto from Leeds. 25 million. They've sold some attacking players like Minter. I guess he wasn't really their player anyway because he's out on loan anyway. But I've also got them losing like Almiron, who I think they'd be happy to sell on to Saudi for £20 million. So maybe bringing in Gnonto could be something that they could do. I've also seen or shown on here that there's the Anderson sale, Minter sale. Dubravka has gone to Al Arabi. Kraft for 2.5 million, and then a few free transfers in the middle there as well. Next up, and towards the end now, Forest. Very difficult to predict are Nottingham Forest, and they've already done quite a bit of business as well with the brand new goalkeeper, Carlos Miguel, who is 6'8" and just a ginormous goalie. Milenkovic, great on FM. If he's as good as he is on FM in real life, they've got themselves a real player here. And he should be a good player. Fiorentina have gone on European runs in the past couple of seasons, getting to finals with him at the heart of their defence. 12 million. seems like a bit of a bargain to me. I don't know. Does anyone think that that seems like good business from Forest? Maybe that's kind of then equaled out by spending so much on Elliot Anderson, who again is a good footballer, but I don't think he's a £35 million footballer necessarily. I've also brought them in Leander Dendoncker from Villa, Fofana from Chelsea on a loan, and Kelechi Iheanacho's on a free transfer. It seems very, very Forest, just to bring in one extra one, just in case they need them. Very a la Divock Origi when they brought him in, right? They've also, according to me, sold on the following players for a little bit of money. Joe Worrell, Lewis O'Brien, and then a couple of extra players for about £1 million. Or Emmanuel Dennis going back to Watford for however many times he's been there. 4 or 5 at this stage, surely, right? Next is Southampton, and I've decided to do this business after their real life business, which I've highlighted on here, of Sugawara from AZ Alkmaar, Ronnie Edwards, the youngster. Again, he was great on FM at the start of, I think it was the start of last year's game, from Peterborough. Nathan Wood, Flynn Downs, Taylor Harwood-Bellis for big money from City after his loan spell, and Charlie Taylor. I've got them bringing in Jasuran Raksaki from Palace for £7 million, Ryan Fraser on a free, David Brooks from Bournemouth, Brandon Thomas Asante from West Brom, and then a romantic one, because there's, the romantic in me sees a little return to the Premier League for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. He was, started out at Southampton, £4 million bringing back from Turkey. I think this would be a cool one, a nice one. So I brought him in to try and, I think they'll need a few extra players to go and play in the Premier League, won't they? Maybe a little bit of Premier League experience too. And I think that'd be quite a fun one if it was to happen. Sales, I've added these sales on top of the ones that they've done in real life, which you can see listed here. And those are Onuachu to Trabzonspor, and then Lisbury, Stuart and Aribo all making their way out. Sort of low-key business, but a turnover of players that you might expect to see. Spurs, we've looked at a lot of these already, actually. The Premier League ones we've seen, because we've seen them being sold by the other clubs, haven't we? But I have brought in, after the business done in real life of Archie Gray, great signing, I think, by the way. Such a good young player. He's got a lot of games under his belt at Leeds already. And then Spurs being able to pick him up, I think, I'm jealous, to be honest. I think it's a really good signing, Archie Gray. I like him a lot as a footballer. And Lucas Bergvall, he's great on FM. And usually, if a player's good on FM, it's because they're going to be good in real life, right? So 2 good signings there. And I've added to that Jacob Ramsey, Ivan Toney, Conor Gallagher, we've talked about, and Kyogo Furuhashi from Celtic, he's tearing up the Scottish League. He looks like just a really good player, doesn't he? I feel like, again, the Ange connection there, maybe this is something that could happen. And I think they'll sell these players here. The one that is the contentious one is Richarlison being sold to Saudi. Maybe that doesn't happen, but I suppose if they were to get a bid this big, then maybe it would happen. But Brian Hill, Lo Celso, Reguilon, I think these are players that we could see leave. And Emerson Royale, maybe not for quite 25 million, but is heavily linked with a move to Milan, isn't he, at the moment? So I think he's one that might move on. That is the Spurs business. We're into our last couple. And again, we've seen a lot of these ones as well, West Ham here. They've brought in real life already, Max Kilman. Big money that they spent for Max Kilman, but I think he is, again, a good footballer. Where's Foderingham on a free? That's less one that we need to talk about, to be honest. Luis Guilherme, I find this really interesting, by the way. 1, because I quite like him in FM. 2, because he's a right-sided attacker, plays on the right wing. Who have they got on the right wing already? Mohamed Kudus and Jared Bowen. Who's their best player and main player and their poster boy of a player? Jared Bowen. Where have they been playing Jared Bowen? Striker. It looks like they're going to go and sign another striker. So they're going to have too many right wingers. What does that mean for the future of Mo Kudus? He's got a release clause. This is where it comes back to my Liverpool hat on again, is that maybe they are getting themselves ready for a Mo Kudus departure, which is why they've gone big on a youngster in Luis Guilherme. Maybe that's conspiracy-like from me, but just watch this space. For me, anyway. I've brought in to West Ham Aaron Wan-Bissaka for £25 million. That one I think might happen. Scott McTominay has been heavily linked with West Ham a few times. £30 million. Todibo, it looks like they're in the market for Todibo in real life. Somerville, loads of links to him. I think this is quite good business. A lot of this from West Ham. And then the speculative one, which I think we might need to replace, actually. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I've brought in, but I think it might end up being John Duran from Aston Villa instead. Similar type of mould, though. Big, tall, strong striker. But I think it might be John Duran rather than Dominic Calvert-Lewin in there. Just to show you the outs as well. Lots of these are real life ones that have actually happened. Flynn Downs to Southampton, for example. A lot of these are me then the other ones are the ones that I think might just happen. Kurt Zouma to Fulham, Maxwell Cornet to Hull, and then Luizao off to Botafogo for £2 million. And that takes us through on this epic chat about transfer stuff to our final team, which is Wolves. Wolves have done some business as well themselves. They have brought in Rodrigo Gomez. Tommy Doyle has become a permanent signing after his loan. Pedro Lima has been brought in. He is a young right back. You see him there, look. And finally, Jorgen Strand Larsen on a loan. I think it's a loan to buy, but he is big, tall and strong and pretty fast. He's very good on FM, is Jorgen Strand Larsen. On top of that, I think they might go for these players here. Anul Ahmedhodzic from Sheffield United with their relegation. I think he proved that he's Premier League class, and Wolves have already sold Max Kilman this summer, so maybe a replacement for him. Morgan Whittaker in from Plymouth. He's just a really good player that I think would be well suited to Wolves. And finally, a player they've been heavily linked to in the past, Yuri Alberto. I think it was like they didn't quite have the money or the PSR wiggle room to be able to get this done in January, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were to go back in for him this summer. Yuri Alberto, he is a Brazilian striker. And then in terms of outgoings, these guys here might well be departing. Fabio Silva finally leaving, Podence going permanently. Maybe a big sale of Hwang Hee-chan at this stage. Maybe Boubacar Traore moving on. A lot of it is speculative, but I think they will, if they want to go as big as they want to in terms of signings here, they might need to see one or two leaving as well. And with that team now done, we have gone through an entire Premier League realistic rebuild. How many of these will I have actually got right? I want you to keep a watch on the real life transfer window and come back to this video and let me know ones that I've got wrong, or you can come and let me know which ones I've got spectacularly wrong. That is absolutely fine as well, because like I say, a lot of guesswork, but a lot of, you know, it's sort of educated guesswork where I've tried to look into real life links and tried to chat to the community like in the Discord and have a chat about who might go where. And lots of people have helped out with the making of this video who support the relative clubs and things. So let's see how right we are. Let's also have a look at the season preview before we do this simulation. Man City favourites, Liverpool, then Newcastle, then Arsenal. That's very interesting because I'm going to say here, this isn't a Premier League prediction video, but I think Arsenal might win the league next year. I would hate it, but I've just got a weird feeling that maybe this is finally their year. It's probably City though, isn't it? Let's be honest. To go down at the other end of proceedings, Southampton, Ipswich, Leicester are the teams favourite for relegation. The three promoted teams to go straight back down according to the pre-season odds here from FM. Let's go to the end of the season and let's find out if that is actually the case. Okay, so I've simulated the season. Let's see what the results are of all of those transfers that I made then by clicking on to the Premier League season here and finding out that Man City have won the league. I mean, you know, I speculated that I think Arsenal might do it. It looks like FM thinks that it will be City. City have got themselves 90 points. Very interestingly, though, Manchester United second. So Ten Hag, I assume, is still in charge at the club. He is. The revival, the Ineos regime, off to a pretty good start by finishing second behind City. Arsenal third. Spurs fourth. So go on, Ange. I assume it's still Ange in charge. It is. And then Liverpool down in fifth. That's where the season preview predictions were wrong then. It's Newcastle sixth, Chelsea in seventh, then Villa in eighth. I suppose the top eight there is maybe what we'd expect, but the order, I'm not sure. I mean, if Liverpool finished fifth, although actually they have qualified for the Champions League there, I guess because of how the brackets and everything else has gone in other competitions, it looks like that will be a very interesting season, especially when you consider how close this is. Only 9 points between second and fifth, and only 2 points off fourth Liverpool there, and only 3 points off third there with Arsenal. That would be an interesting season. I want to have a look at some of the top goal scorers too. Before we look at those, relegated, Fulham in 18th, Southampton in 19th, and Ipswich bottom on just 22 points. But that means it wasn't all of the promoted teams then that got relegated. Leicester have managed to get away with it with 41 points. Forest in 16th, Bournemouth just above the precipice with 38 points. They're a Brentford, where you'd expect them to be. I talked about it earlier in the video, didn't I? In 13th. Brighton down in 12th. Only 10th for Wolves, 11th for Everton. I want to have a look at the goals really. Erling Haaland, you won't be surprised to see, it has finished as the top goal scorer. 20 goals for him. Joshua Zirkzee, new signing for United, 18 goals from him. Now, I'm not shocked by this because in Football Manager, he has the profile to be a really good goal scorer. He's pretty quick. I mean, he's not lightning fast, but he's big and tall, which is almost enough. He's got great dribbling as well, actually, and really good technique. Like, he's always been a goal scorer in Football Manager and never really hit the heights that maybe early in his career when he was at Bayern Munich, people thought that he might do. He's had like a few different spells. Bologna did great last year, which is why he's got himself this move to Manchester United. He has finished second top goal scorer. Saka in there. Watkins joint third with Saka. Cole Palmer fifth alongside Beto. Darwin Núñez did get 15 goals, that's pretty good for him. Undav back at Brighton got himself 15. I will mention as well that there would have been some January transfers happening, but not loads. I can see United didn't make any. I suppose it doesn't really matter too much, but obviously I wasn't in charge. I wasn't around to do those transfers. I did reduce the... We did reduce the transfer budgets to try and make it these players that were there, but obviously there will be a little bit of movement. If they sell a player, they could spend that money, etc. That is interesting, though. Top average rating. Let's have a look at that. Top average rating in the league was... Okay, it was Mo Salah with a 7.94. Then Saka, De Bruyne, Rodrigo, I should say. City did spend in the January then. They brought in Rodrigo... from Real Madrid, for 91 million initially, and Mikalenko from Everton. So City did bolster their ranks and did bring in a couple of extra players. So maybe that's why they're the champions. He was up there with the top average ratings. Who got the most assists in the league? Most assists was... Okay, it was Kevin De Bruyne. Again, not so surprising. Salah in second. I did just notice as I was looking, by the way, Darwin Núñez had the highest expected goals and actually did outscore his expected goals. 13.5 expected goals for Darwin Núñez. Scored 15. Where on earth then on this list is Erling Haaland? Because he finished as... What? Hang on a minute. He had an expected goals of 11.86 and scored 20. He outperformed it by 8.14. That is outrageous from Erling Haaland. He had less expected goals than Núñez, but managed to score an extra 5 goals than it. I guess 20 for Haaland isn't even that much, so maybe they weren't creating as much. They still won the league, so I suppose there is that as well. Anything else we want to see on here? I suppose let's just go to these top ones here. Most red cards was Gabriel at Arsenal. Headers 1, Sven Botman. I like to look at the stats because when we're doing transfers, we want to look at the individual player statistics, don't we, that go along with it. That, though, is the final Premier League table. I suppose we should have a look at who won the Champions League and some of the domestic cups too. Champions League was won by Real Madrid. They beat PSG in the final. Who did best out of the English clubs? City and Liverpool both going out in the quarterfinals to Real Madrid and Bayern Munich respectively. Let's have a look at the Europa League here with Arsenal losing in the final. That is interesting. They have made it to a final and then lost on penalties to Porto, as well as the Conference League. Did we have an English winner of the Conference League? We did. Chelsea did win the Conference League then, with the top goal scorer being Victor Osimhen. The FA Cup was won by Arsenal 3-0 against Wolves in the final. And the League Cup was won by Liverpool beating Sunderland, getting themselves to the final. Fair play from the Championship, getting to the final and losing to Liverpool 2-0 in that one. That then concludes our video for today. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a long one, but I just love to talk transfers. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too. I really want to hear your thoughts as well. Talk to me about your club. Do you agree with the moves that I made for your team? Do you think there'll be different ones? Do you think I was right or correct with any of the calls that I made? And yeah, let's just have a chat in the comments down below because, as I say, I love to talk transfers. Thank you very much for making it to the end. You can prove to me that you've made it to the end of the video because you can just write "I love transfers" as your comment, and then I know that you're a real one. And thanks for watching all the way to the end. I hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. See you next time. Bye-bye.